Welcome to this edition of Like Nobody's Business. I'm Mary Beth Seawald, President and CEO of the Vegas Chamber. Last month, more than 200 Nevada business and community leaders joined the Vegas Chamber for our annual Washington, D.C. fly-in. This is a week-long trip in partnership with the Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance, and it really was an opportunity to advocate for the needs of our state to decision makers and to get more visibility on Capitol Hill. This edition of the show highlights conversations with three members of Nevada's congressional delegation, Congresswomen Dina Titus and Susie Lee, and Congressman Mark Amodei, who we interviewed during the fly-in. They're going to share their perspectives on federal priorities to help our state grow and thrive. Let's watch. We are honored today to be at our nation's capital with the largest delegation ever coming to DC with the Vegas Chamber. I'm here today with Congresswoman Susie Lee. Thank you so much for being with us.
Great to be here. It's great to be here with all the members of the Chamber. You have been an incredible advocate for businesses in our business community. So it's always good to see Las Vegas in Washington.
That's right. And we feel like we've just about brought all of Nevada to DC.
I know, right? Largest ever.
It
tells you you're doing something right. And I think it's really important that our business community makes sure we understand what's happening on the ground. We can't fight for them unless we know. So I think this is such an important time for you all to be here.
Well, thank you. We feel that way as well, and we appreciate your tireless advocacy for the state. I know that you've addressed our delegation, and let's just go ahead and start with what were some of the things that were on the top of their mind and messages that you shared with them today?
Yeah, obviously we talked about the journey we've all been on together with the pandemic and its impact it's had on our community. Kudos to the Chamber for, I can't even tell you how many Zoom calls we did together and town halls we had, making sure that people understood how they could get the resources that we fought for to keep businesses afloat, to keep employees employed. But more importantly, I always say Las Vegas was ground zero for the pandemic and economic devastation, but we're now ground zero for a lot of the economic opportunity. The bipartisan infrastructure package that will get, incredible investments in our infrastructure into Nevada. I say we're in the business of importing tourists, so we need to be able to make sure our infrastructure can get them to and from Las Vegas. To making sure to investing in the CHIPS Act, which is all that innovation, money for science and innovative research. Nevada has generally been left out, an underserved area when it comes to that. And through a provision I included in that bill, we're going to see between $7 and $11 million of funding come to our state for that type of research. So, continuing to make sure, I always say one of my goals when I was elected was to make sure that the money we send here gets reinvested back in Las Vegas. And I know that the Chamber has been an incredible advocate for that. But, as a member of the Appropriations Committee, that's been important. Other issues we talked about, obviously, water is top of mind with everyone as we look to economic development in our community, making sure we have enough water. And, I talked about my large-scale water recycling bill that was included in the infrastructure package. But it's not just that bill. I think Southern Nevada Water Authority has led the way, number one, in conservation and recycling and reuse, but also in building these types of innovative partnerships so that this is a partnership between LA and Las Vegas, where LA will recycle the water and we'll keep it in Lake Mead. So there's no building of pipelines. It's really just smart investment and smart partnerships. And so, but we have so much more to do in terms of workforce development, housing, and healthcare.
You bring up so many of the topics that are critical to Southern Nevada. Water is huge, and the Chamber has been working on all of those. And so I'd like to drill down just a little bit more on the CHIPS Act.
That is one thing that is very near and dear to your heart. What are some of the provisions specifically of that bill? You talked a little bit about the dollars that are actually going to come back home to us in Nevada. What are just a couple of those provisions that we should know about?
Well, I think the most important provision, I mean, when you think about chip manufacturing, and we're all dealing with inflation and the impact of the economic disruption of COVID, supply chain disruption, it sort of ripped the Band-Aid off of manufacturing in our country. And we need to bring manufacturing back to America. And that's a major part of the CHIPS bill, but also bringing semiconductor manufacturing back to our country. I mean, I'm sure you hear it from businesses, whether you're building slot machines to build, to telephones, to whatever, cars, our car dealers, it impacts every sector. And we rely too heavily on foreign manufacturing of chips. And so that's a key investment, not just to, make sure we deal with the supply chain, but bring costs down. And as I said, the National Science Foundation doles out plenty of money in terms of science, research, and innovation. And underserved areas like Southern Nevada miss out a lot of times on that type of funding. And why that funding is so important is because economic development and diversification comes through research and innovation. And that comes through our university system and Desert Research Institute. And so making sure that we are identified as an underserved area, we will now be able to get between $7 and $11 million in that funding into our state. It's not just having that funding, it's the research that it's supporting could support our next new sector or business sector that we then bring to Southern Nevada to diversify our economy.
Exactly. So having said all that, what would be some of your priorities for the coming months and year for next year?
Coming months and year, listen, I mean, first and foremost is making sure we're doing everything we can to bring down costs for businesses and for families. We just passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which does a lot around Medicare. We passed several bills that I don't think will get taken up in the House, taking on gas price gouging, lowering food and fuel costs, but making sure we're doing everything to shore up our supply chain, to, invest in, like we did in our infrastructure, but get that money working. We can pass all the bills we want, but making sure that money gets out into our community and gets to work, to me, is really the next. Issues that are important to me is workforce development. I hear from businesses every single day, they just can't find enough workforce. I introduced a bill along with Jackie Rosen to support sector partnerships, which are workforce development programs that pair businesses with universities and nonprofits, because as we know, many of the jobs of the future aren't going to require a 4-year degree, that we can do these types of internship programs and get people trained and get them into the workforce. And then, of course, housing and healthcare. We're in a crisis in terms of availability in both of those in Southern Nevada. So continuing to make sure we get our residency slots, we're bringing more doctors and nurses. I got community project funding for Nevada State College so that they could beef up their nursing training program, but also bringing down the cost of housing. I mean, you can't import work, you can't attract workers if they can't afford to live in our community. That's going to be, those are my important issues, as well as our water crisis as well.
And those are all the same issues that we're working on at the Vegas Chamber as well. So we appreciate your efforts and your advocacy toward all of those things on behalf of the entire state of Nevada. Just last question, to switch gears just a little bit. How would you describe the current mood in Washington, D.C.? I know.
48 days before the election?
Yeah.
We've come through an incredible period, obviously, of threats to our democracy. And I don't think that should be, I don't think it could be overstated, just what's at stake in terms of making sure that we are securing our systems, to prevent what was attempted on January 6th from actually happening, which was disrupting our elections. But also, when you think of that, but also we passed the infrastructure bill, we passed the PACT Act for our veterans, the CHIPS and Research Act for bringing manufacturing to our country. We even got some bipartisan support on the Safer Communities Act, gun safety legislation. So while, the media likes to say how divisive we are, I think this has been a period of us trying to roll up our sleeves and work together. Not to say that there isn't, serious partisanship happening, especially at this time of year. I think that, coming out of this pandemic, just understanding what was at stake and what, we lost and almost lost, realizing that we have to come together and pass bipartisan legislation. We can't run a country where you depend on, having full control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and then 4 years later trying to reverse that and reverse everything that just happened. It's not good for our country, and it's not good for the American people.
Well, Congresswoman Susie Lee, on behalf of all of us at the Vegas Chamber, our Board of Trustees, and the team, thank you so much for being such a staunch advocate for our state.
Thank you. Thank you for all you do.
As humans, we're visual creatures. In fact, American adults spend nearly 6 hours each day watching video, and we're evolving and expanding across screens. Whether we're surfing the web at work, streaming our favorite show in a waiting room, or watching the game live at home, Cox Media's digital video solutions can deliver your business's message to consumers in a way that creates a meaningful connection and drives them to take action. Grow your business. Call Cox Media today.
We are so happy this week to be in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., with 240 of our best friends from Nevada, including another one of our best friends, Congressman Mark Amodei. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for the invite, Mary Beth.
Well, we just appreciate everything that you do for Nevada and for employers across the state. You've been such a great advocate and a great partner for the Chamber, so thanks for that.
Happy to do it. You guys are doing a great job for your members, healthcare, other areas like that. So thank you folks for what you do.
Well, you spent a lot of time addressing our delegation talking about water. Obviously, we know it's a huge topic for not only Southern Nevada and the state, but for the entire planet. But what are some things that you think that could be done on a federal level to help us with our sustainability?
Well, I think one of the feds can encourage more regional thinking to start. That's the first step. One of your members asked a question about, well, the whole West, and it's like, yeah, if you can get those states together, if you wait for them to do it on their own, I'm not saying that won't happen, but if you really think that's a good idea, there needs to be some encouragement from the federal level in terms of not only the basin states on the Colorado system, but West-wide to say, well, where's the water, where's the use, where are the needs in terms of responsible growth and stuff like that. So I think that's an area, and I'm not a guy who says the federal government's the answer to every issue. But having said that, I think there's some room there for the federal government to play a meaningful role.
You talked a little bit about desal, and you talked about, replacing water downstream, and there are all kinds of possible solutions kind of floating around. Is anything looking viable?
Well, first of all, desal is a technology that is in use on smaller scales. The military uses it on ships. Other countries use it on larger scales. Our challenge is, how do you use that on a scale at the lower end of the Colorado River Basin to make sure that the folks who have allotments have those allotments still fulfilled, but it's also in an infrastructure sense, like you build them down there, they're at where the resource is needed, and then you leave water in the river for the upstream states, which is particularly pertinent for Southern Nevada. So anyhow, it's like, hey, this is an area where maybe you need some more R&D in terms of bringing that scale up larger, but so let's do that, because I just think, if I'm wrong, it's great news. But I don't think you're going to get any upper basin states going, okay, you can have more of our water. It's the West. People are not inclined to do that. And I don't think, you can control the planetary systems in terms of, hey, I want you to rain more here, or snow more there. If you really want to be in control, then I think that's an area where it's like we either need to go that direction or prove that it's not viable so we can look at something else. But that looks like the best, I think it looks like the best potential right now.
How do you think we balance the growth of Nevada? Southern Nevada, Northern Nevada is growing too and has its own set of water issues. But, you know, we're growing into more and more of a sporting events city and things like that. And we're looking at a drying climate more than just a drought. A drought implies that, oh, it'll rain and we'll be fine.
It'll be over, yeah.
That's not the case.
I don't disagree with you. But I think one of the history things that we talked about was, hey, the Southern Nevada Public Lands Management Act is 22 years old now or whatever, authorized the sale of 70,000 acres. This is a growth question. Authorized the sale of 70,000 acres, and in 22 years, we've disposed of 35,000. That, I think, is a strong argument to say your local planning commissions, county commissions, city councils are being responsible with their growth. So if you just hate growth, that's fine, but expecting, for instance, the venue of Clark County, Las Vegas, you know, fabulous Las Vegas, to expect no growth with that, quite frankly, is not in line with what the history is or what I think your members and other people in Southern Nevada expect. So you have to solve those challenges. How do we do that without putting water supply at risk, having the right sewage capacity? How do you move people around? All those things that go with responsible growth.
Well, and you talk about Clark County Lands Bill.
Mm-hmm.
And you also asked the question when you were speaking with our delegation, what is the law that's being planned right now?
Yeah. And
We don't know or nothing.
well, that gets back to the whole lobbying plan.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that you want? What committees does it go through? One of the strengths that Las Vegas has is when you say, hey, I want to educate the chairman of the House Natural Resources Committee or the House Armed Services Committee for Nellis stuff or stuff like that, we had a nice chuckle. It's like, you know, it's not hard to get people to visit Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. And post-COVID, the numbers speak for that before. But it's like, bring them out. Here's what's going on. Make them aware of the history. A lot of it's just education because people don't know that because they haven't lived the experience like your members have.
So to zoom out a little bit, change the subject just a little bit. What's some of the legislative pieces you're working on that you feel positive about?
We haven't passed a lands bill since Harry Reid was in the Senate. That's a compliment to Senator Reid. But that's been too long. We need to move that legislation. That there's vital interest in terms of Southern Nevada. There's just as vital stuff going on in Northern Nevada. None of them require somebody to be irresponsible or look the other way or endanger a species or any of that stuff. And so it's like, we need to get that moving again because as we said earlier, unlike any other state in the nation, in Nevada with the large percentage of federal ownership, every single small town, city, large city, metropolitan area is surrounded by federal land. So if you want to control your destiny as the local planning and zoning people, when you grow up, you need federal land. And so that needs to start moving again just for the economic stability of small and large both. So that's our number one thing on that. The other thing that we're always, you know, people go, the press always reports on bills, but when you talk about the other two things, constituent services and oversight, we do a lot of oversight work. You know, obviously with BLM, you've got a district office in Las Vegas. There are 6 others throughout the state. We do a lot of oversight on that. What's your real estate division doing? What's going on with what's going on in Railroad Valley with BLM and NASA and Nye County and all that. So we've got a lot of stuff going right now that we'll continue to follow up on, which is appropriate. I mean, Congress appropriates the money, and then you do oversight to make sure that those agencies are using it responsibly. It'd really be nice to see somebody get a courage attack and do something on immigration, because nothing leads to executives wanting to fill that void, and Republican and Democrat presidents have done the same thing lately. And it's like, well, you may agree with one and disagree with the other, but the void is created because Congress has done nothing, and Congress needs to shift out of that. They just really, really need to shift out of that.
What do you see as some of the biggest topics besides those we've mentioned?
Well, the
water,
economy,
infrastructure,
the economy, and
inflation,
and energy are ones to where it's like I think it's possible. Do I think electric is what the future holds? Yeah, I do. The question becomes, are you going to force feed some of that now and make it hurt versus continuing to? The United States has done the best job of any nation on earth in terms of being responsible with air quality, water quality, all that stuff. Not mission accomplished, but it's like, we've cleaned up how we generate coal. Nuclear can be clean. Everyone's going, oh my God. And it's like, come on. If it's responsible, until we get to all electric, fine. But this bit where it's like, hey, Mary Beth, in 6 years, you're going to have an electric vehicle and so is everybody else. Well, maybe that's good for you. But then you look at affordability, you look at the economic impact, you say, why are we shutting down all fossil fuels? The military, when you talk about, it's like, really? They're going to be all electric? Is China going to be? Or whatever. I mean, or meeting terrorist threats. Or it just go forward responsibly. Don't declare victory. We're not there yet. But I also think we don't need to cripple ourselves to get there.
Yeah.
So energy, and that also really, everything's energy. Supply chain's energy, distribution's energy, getting to work's energy. When you get home is energy. So when you talk about the economy and inflation, it's like, yeah, the grocery store, we get that. But it's like, energy affects everything.
Yeah, and there are a lot of unintended consequences domino effect that we don't really even
Yep.
necessarily know.
Yep.
You mentioned nuclear a second ago. You know that the Vegas Chamber has been an opponent of Yucca.
Yucca.
And where is that? Did it
It
ever
may be
go
pretty
away?
close to being going away. I mean, the
Okay.
state's filing, if they haven't filed already, we're within a couple days of filing a thing with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to basically unhook the whole deal. Because, and you've got Brad Kroll from Nevada, who's now on the Regulatory Commission. So, and I think it's one of those things where, whether you love it, you hate it, you're in between or whatever, it's one of those things that's been floating around long enough and whatever. And here's the technology has kind of gotten to the point where it's like, maybe you don't need a place to bury it. And whatever the most responsible, there are recycling issues. Disposal issues have matriculated since this was conceived. And so it wouldn't surprise me to see under this administration, and a lot of it is, it would be a heck of a feather in Senator Cortez Masto's hat, or President Biden, or Senator Rosen's hat, 2 years from now, to say, hey, especially in the largest population center of the state, Southern Nevada, to go, hey, this was done on my watch. Mm-hmm. So there's politics in it, and there's also, I think, the history and the reality of maybe the science is matriculated beyond needing to bury it someplace really deep.
That would be great. I
Yep.
think so.
Yep.
Well, Congressman Amadei, thank you so much for being with us on this trip. Thank you for your advocacy for Nevada. We really appreciate your partnership.
You guys are great to work with. Thank you for having me.
All right. I'm Mary Beth Seawald.
As humans, we're visual creatures. In fact, American adults spend nearly 6 hours each day watching video, and we're evolving and expanding across screens. Whether we're surfing the web at work, streaming our favorite show in a waiting room, or watching the game live at home, Cox Media's digital video solutions can deliver your business's message to consumers in a way that creates a meaningful connection and drives them to take action. Grow your business. Call Cox Media today.
And we are so happy to be in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., on the Vegas Chamber's largest fly-in ever in our history. We are here with Congresswoman Dina Titus. Thanks so much for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me. That's great. 240 Nevadans influencing the Hill.
That's right. We're very happy to be with you today as well. You've been such a staunch advocate for Nevada in general, and especially the business community and employers as well. So we want to thank you for being such a great partner to the Chamber.
Well, thank you. I think we do work well together, and we wouldn't have this recovery if it weren't for all that small businesses are doing to keep their personnel on, reinvest in the state. And, you know, small businesses are the key to economic diversification, recovery, you name it.
They really are. That is so true. Talk to us first. Let's start with some of your priorities and what you're working on right now.
Well, I chair an infrastructure subcommittee that has to do with FEMA. So, you know, we're doing a lot there with all the natural disasters. Just look what's happened in Puerto Rico in the last few days. But it also covers drought, wildfires, things like that, and we are seeing more and more of that with climate change. But it includes economic development, and certainly that's important for the state. So we're reauthorizing the economic development, and I want to be sure that the things that really impact businesses and people who want to invest are included in that reauthorization.
Okay. Switching gears a little bit, you're co-chair of the I-11 Congressional Caucus. You know that I-11 has been something that the Chamber has advocated for years. Where are we with that, and what can we do to move that forward? Because as we know, Las Vegas and Phoenix are the only two major metropolitan cities that are not connected by an interstate.
Well, that's right. And I've been talking to the Secretary Pete, who's been out to Nevada, about the importance of this. And what we're trying to get them to do is not just invest everything in the Northeast corridor where things are falling apart, but remember in the Southwest corridor, we need more access. And certainly from Las Vegas to Phoenix would be part of that supply chain. And we do need an interstate there. Another thing that's good about it is it's bipartisan support for it. It's by state because Arizona supports it, and it has regional significance. So that increases our chance of getting more federal money. In Nevada, we've pretty much determined the route, done a lot of the environmental impact studies, and are kind of moving towards the border. So now we just got to get Arizona kind of pumped up.
That's right. What other priorities do you have that our members need to know about?
Well, we're still working on the speed train. I think there's a chance that Brightline will get some funding, and that will help with transportation between Southern California and Nevada. And of course, water is always a serious issue. We're in the middle of the end of a 1,200-year drought. We're the hottest, the sunniest, the driest. So anything we can do to think outside the box to get more water will be a good thing. I know DRI is working on cloud seeding, working on drip irrigation. There's money in the infrastructure bill to improve projects along the Colorado River so there's more efficiency of delivering water. And there's a big recycling project with California that we funded in some of these recovery bills. And so all of those will help, but we got to always keep it front of mind.
Well, Congresswoman Titus, thank you as always for being such an advocate for all of us across the state.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. As a reminder, voting has begun for the 2022 general election. Whether you vote by mail, early vote, or go to the polls on Election Day, the Vegas Chamber urges you to cast your ballot and make your voice be heard. The Vegas Chamber also endorsed several candidates in several state and local government races, including the races for governor and other constitutional offices, Nevada legislature, county, and city races, as well as boards of education. So, for more information there, please go to vegaschamber.com for a complete list of our endorsed candidates. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Mary Beth Seawald.